How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of Bear Down Uncut, where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Today, in episode number 45 of Uncut, we're going to be running down 9 candidates to break out for the Bears in 2020. We recently, in another episode of Uncut, did a little bit of this, but we wanted to talk a little bit more about some players who are going to break out in 2020. Before I introduce myself and my co-hosts, we are grinding for 1.7k subs. Obviously, trying to continue to push to 2,000. So if you are new to the channel and want Bears content every day of the week, do us a favor, subscribe by clicking that red button, click the bell for notifications whenever we post, and do us a favor and like the video. I am your host, Chris Malpe, and today I am joined with my co-hosts Parth and Jaylen McClinton. How's it going, fellas?
It's going good, just woke up like 30 minutes ago, and here we are recording Bears videos, so let's do it.
Same. Last 2 days of school for me. I'm very excited to finally be in summer. But, can't wait to talk some Bears football.
Yeah, you guys will be seeing this one on Friday. We're pre-recording all our videos for the weekend because I'm heading up to Lake Geneva, so that should be fun. But let's hop right into this one. We each have 3 candidates for breakout players on the Bears in 2020, and I'm going to start with my first candidate, and that is Roquan Smith. Looking at Roquan, obviously, a first-round pick from 2 years ago in 2018, and he's been absolutely incredible ever since coming to Chicago. Almost broke Brian Urlacher's rookie record for most tackles in a season with 121. Also 8 tackles for loss, 5 QB hits, 5 sacks, 5 passes defended, and an interception in 2018. Obviously also an interception in the playoffs. Picked off one of Nick Foles' passes there, which was really nice. If you look at him in 2019, it was a little bit worse, but still incredibly productive for the time he spent on the field. He tore his pectoral in Week 14, also missed a week due to a personal issue, so only ended up playing 12 games, had 2 passes defended, 1 interception, 101 combined tackles. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you give him 4 more games to play, he's probably going to smash that 121 out of the water. 2 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, and 2 quarterback hits, so just a little bit down, but still as productive for how much he played. So just in general, like basing it off of that, if he would have played 16 games, he would have had better stats in most every category except for maybe sacks. So, Roquan is a player who's absolutely ridiculous. I think he makes his first Pro Bowl, maybe gets an All-Pro nomination here in 2020. He's a player who's incredibly underappreciated. I think he's the best linebacker from that draft other than Darius Leonard. So definitely a player that I think could break out here in the upcoming season. Jaylen, I'm going to pass it to you. Who is your first player that you could see breaking out in 2020?
My first player would have to be Anthony Miller. I talked about this a couple times before. I expect Anthony to be, a top 20 receiver, maybe top 10 by the prime of his career. Last season, he didn't start off very hot. Like the first 8 games, he only had about like 200 yards, but in the last 8 he had over 400 yards and finished the season with 656 yards, 52 receptions, 20.6 average, and 2 touchdowns. The touchdowns was obviously down from his rookie season, but he had more receptions, more yards, and stuff like that. Anthony is a great route runner. If he can stay healthy and be the number 2 receiver to Allen Robinson, I definitely feel like he can easily have over 1,000 yards if he stays healthy. He struggles with his shoulder a lot. He played on one shoulder his rookie season and still had a productive season. Basically played on one shoulder last season too and still had a very productive season. So if he can stay healthy, I expect a lot of big things out of him.
Absolutely. Anthony Miller, another player there from 2018, 9 career touchdowns and over 1,000 career receiving yards. Really turned it on in the second half of the season there. In 2019, 52 receptions for 656 yards. Parth, it's your turn, buddy. Who is your first player? And I'm pretty sure we all know who this is going to be because he hasn't even been mentioned at this point. And he's probably the biggest breakout candidate. But who do you have for the player that you could see breaking out on the Bears in 2020?
I'm gonna go with David Montgomery.
Bingo.
He showed a lot of flashes last year. He's a great runner and he runs hard. We had Prince Mukamar on the show and he said he works just as hard as any other guy on the team. He also said that he shows flashes of Saquon Barkley, which is a really high praise if you think about it. We don't need him to become Saquon Barkley, but if he does, that'd just be amazing. But David Montgomery, he's an interesting guy out of Iowa State. Last year wasn't the best for him. He only averaged 3.7 yards per carry. Can't blame him for all of it, though. The running scheme was terrible, to say the least. A lot of blame goes to Matt Nagy, Mark Helfrich for that. Uh, and also the offensive line was terrible in general as well. There's no running holes. We were one of the dead last in offensive line rankings. So I think Montgomery with an improved offensive line is only going to get better. He was sixth in the most broken tackles. And as a rookie to be up there, that's just another accomplishment. He's just a great guy in general, too. I think a lot of people underestimate his skills, especially in the division. So it's going to be a great season for Montgomery.
Yeah, you look at David Montgomery, 1,074 all-purpose yards. During his first season in Chicago, 889 rushing yards for 6 touchdowns, and also a great receiving back with 25 catches for 185 yards and a touchdown there. Someone who's definitely looking to break out. I mean, as long as the offensive line can be palatable, he should have a good year. Heading into player 2 for each of us, we're doing 9 of these, so now we're on to the second tier. I'm going to go with Robert Quinn here. This is definitely one that kind of coincides with Khalil Mack, but if you look at Robert Quinn in 2019, he played 14 games for the Dallas Cowboys, 3 passes defended, he had 2 forced fumbles, but obviously when it comes to tackling, he was way more impressive. 11 and a half sacks in 14 games, only 34 tackles, but still 13 of those 34 tackles came for a tackle for a loss, and also 22 QB hits. He was incredibly productive in all the snaps he's gotten, and I've said it in the past, it's no knock to DeMarcus Lawrence, but when you've got Khalil Mack one-on-one and Tank Lawrence one-on-one, I'm going to take Khalil Mack probably 9 of 10 days. I expect Robert Quinn is going to get the same exact opportunities that Leonard Floyd had and couldn't capitalize on. I 100,000% expect him to have another good year, and it might be similar to his 2019 season. I think I would take 11 and a half sacks compared to Leonard Floyd's 3 there in 2019, so I expect Robert Quinn to have another incredibly solid season. Akeem Hicks being back in the mix and being healthy is also something that is going to help indefinitely. So Robert Quinn is going to be my second player to break out. Obviously, the Pro Football Writer of America, Defensive Player of the Year in 2013, he had 19 sacks, 23 tackles for a loss. Absolutely ridiculous. He's an animal, and he is going to have some fun if he can stay healthy lining up across from Khalil Mack. So, Jaylen, I'm passing back to you. I know who your second player is. It's a pretty obvious one as well. So who do you have?
Yeah.
And this is an important one. This player does need to show up big time in training camp if he does want to have that breakout year. So who is your second player that you think will break out or has the possibility to break out here in the upcoming season?
No, I wouldn't really consider this a breakout because he's already broken out before. I'm talking about Tariq Cohen. In 2018, he was an All-Pro and Pro Bowler, but that's obviously in the past. Last season, his attempts were he went down in every main stat category except for receptions. He went up 8 receptions but had way less receiving yards in 2019 than he did in 2018. He had only 64 attempts for 213 yards with a 3.3 average and no rushing touchdowns at all. In 2018, he had 99 attempts, 444 yards, and a 4.5 average. That's way down. I feel like Maggie didn't really use him to his best ability last season, and he's on the last year of his contract. For a person who might ask for a lot of money just based off that one season that he had in 2018, if he doesn't improve, he might not be on the Bears next year. And I know that's sad to say because I'm a big fan of Tariq, but I definitely feel like if Matt Nagy could use him like he did before as a receiving back, then I definitely feel like he can improve.
Yeah, a tough year there in 2019 for Tariq Cohen. You also have to figure that defenses figured him out a little bit. 6.9 yards from scrimmage in 2018, and then that went down by 2 yards there in 2019. Also had 9 drops, 3 fumbles, way less receiving yards on 8 more catches, and also was very inefficient in the running game. That's actually not the player that I thought you were going to end up going with, but you've got a good one for your last one. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it to you. Who's your next player that you think needs to break out here in 2020?
He's a quarterback, and it's not Trubisky. I'm going to talk about Nick Foles here. Nick Foles, we traded for him, 4th rounder to Jacksonville, and the Bears picked him up because we weren't certain about Trubisky's future here in Chicago. If we look at Nick Foles' best year, it came in 2013, where he had 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And then ever since then, he's never been able to play a full season. Actually, he's never been able to play a full season his whole entire career. So, talking about Nick Foles, he comes to Chicago with a coach that he's familiar with in Bill Lazor, John DeFilippo, and Matt Nagy. I feel like if Trubisky isn't the starting, Nick Foles should have a big year in Chicago. Last year in Jacksonville, he did break his collarbone, but I think coming into the system where he's familiar with, players that he can probably get easily more comfortable with, I think Nick Foles is destined for a big year, especially if he starts.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Nick Foles' career, 13 games there played in 2013, and his next best year came in 2015 when he played in 11, and his best year since then has been 2017 when he played in 8 games, but obviously a lot of those are him featured on the bench. He has been a player who's been a good babysitter in the past, has come off the bench. But that being said, I don't think, and I think we've all agreed on this in the past, that he's going to have the best weapons in any opportunity. I mean, obviously he's had 2 very good teams to play with in Philadelphia when he's produced from 2017 to 2018 and also 2012 to 2014. But he obviously was in St. Louis for a year, Kansas City for a year, Jacksonville for a year, and those teams weren't even in comparison to the lineup that the Bears are putting up here for him. So if he can win the job, he's someone who definitely could be a breakout candidate as well. Finally, we're now going to enter Tier 3. This should bode for some more interesting players that should break out, or possibly can. I mean, I'm sure we're hitting on some, and we might miss on some as well. But this is an interesting one. I'm going to go with Eddie Pinheiro, the kicker. Obviously acquired him last year for a 7th-round pick from the Oakland Raiders, now Las Vegas Raiders. And Eddie was pretty solid. I mean, you look at him, he made 82.1% of his field goals. He was 23 for 28, and also 8 of 8 on extra points, I believe. And he was pretty solid. I mean, 2 for 2 from 50 yards plus. From 40 to 49 yards, he was 3 for 7. I could see some improvement there. Also, I think he missed. Actually, I think he did miss a couple extra points, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, he missed 2 extra points. What am I saying? But just in general, I think he's got the leg. I've always said it. Eddie Pinheiro definitely has the leg. I think he just needs a little bit more consistency. Just needs to be able to hit his targets. And he's still pretty young. He's someone who needs to improve. You can tell that kid has the heart of a lion. He loves to fight and continue to get good. And I think he will continue to improve. And I think he could surprise some Bears fans next year. Obviously, kicking has been an issue here in the past. Connor Barth, Cody Parkey. We had Cairo Santos there for a while. It hasn't been great. But hopefully Eddie Pinheiro can turn it around here, continue to trend upwards, and hopefully break out. So, Jaylen, I'm going to pass it back to you. I know you got a good one here. It's the player I was expecting you to bring up last time, but you recently said to me in our text group chat, we saved the best one for last. So who is your last player? Who is the best one for last?
I'm going with Mitchell Trubisky. I know a lot of Bears fans out there don't feel like he's going to be the starter. They're obviously I can understand why Bears fans are not don't believe in Mitchell no more. Trust me, I do. Even though I'm probably a Mitch stan or whatever you call it. Last year he was hurt. The whole offense had a down year. Mitch hurt his shoulder in like week 4 against the Vikings and wasn't really the same after that, other than a couple games here and there. He had 13,000, not 13,000. I wish he had 13,000. He had 3,138 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions with an 83 quarterback rating. That was all of that. All of his stats were down from the year before in 2018, where he was a Pro Bowl alternate. Mitchell has a big chip on his shoulder. We obviously brought in Nick Foles, who I'm not a big fan of, but if we do have a training camp, he can definitely push Mitch to be to the best ability. A lot of players are coming out there and saying in the Zoom meetings that Mitchell has very high hopes and that he's like answering the right questions. But if you want to continue to be on this team and continue to play football in general, you have to show it on the field, and I expect him to do that, especially with this, I wouldn't say upgraded offense. We got some weapons. Like last year, we really didn't have a tight end. We brought in Cole Kmet and Jimmy Graham. We still have Allen Robinson, who had a great season last year. Anthony Miller is going to get better. Hopefully David Montgomery can get better and this line can block from him. So I expect him to have I want to say he's going to have a better season than he did in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you look at Mitch, if he does win that competition, the big thing for him is going to be using his legs more here in 2020. That's something that we saw in 2018 when he made the Pro Bowl and the Bears went 12-4, and that's something that we're going to have to see moving forward if he does win the competition, because Nick Foles isn't someone who can scramble outside the pocket. Nick Foles is someone who loves the deep ball, who will do all the easy things that one could argue that Mitch can't do consistently, but he doesn't have that aspect with his legs. Looking at Mitch, he had 68 rushes for 421 yards and 3 touchdowns there during his Pro Bowl season, his lone Pro Bowl so far. He's entering 26 years old. When he was 25 in 2019, only 48 rushes for 193 yards. Getting back to his roots is definitely something that the offense is going to have to commit to, especially if Mitch is playing. And I assume at some point barring some sort of injury that he probably will. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it back to you. One last player here that is going to break out in 2020. Who do you got?
I'll go with wide receiver Riley Ridley. Coming out of Georgia, I had a lot of high hopes for him last year, but he just didn't get much playing time, which was questionable in my opinion. But when he did have his playing time, especially in that Week 17 game against the Vikings, he showed up. He caught that 4th and 9 pass where Trubisky scrambled to the right, and he kept running his route, found him in the deep ball. But yeah, Riley Ridley had 6 receptions for 69 yards last year. Basically zero production if you think about it. But I feel like this year with more playing time, we could see a pretty big year out of Riley Ridley. He's got all the tools to be a successful wide receiver in the NFL. He's a great route runner. He can catch most to anything basically. He's got a high point radius. Looking at his stats for this year, I feel like he can get up to like 500 yards if you think about it, especially if the quarterback play can stay consistent, in my opinion.
Yeah, you look at Riley Ridley there in 2019, only 6 receptions for 69 yards. Obviously, that 32-yard catch against the Vikings is the one that stands out. But looking at him, he only played 108 snaps there in 5 games, and a lot of those were spent on the bench. Only 10% of the offensive plays, also played 6 snaps on special teams, which was 1% of the special team snaps. Riley Ridley, definitely another player who is vying to break out here in 2020. Thank you guys so much for tuning into episode 45 of Uncut. If you want more content from us, head over to beardown.com. We're posting columns, articles, and blogs on there basically every day of the week, trying to get you guys as much content as possible. If you are on Instagram, you can find the links to our fan pages down in the description, and you can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Twitter at beardown. Parth, Jaylen McClinton, it is currently Thursday afternoon, and we've got about 3 more of these to go. So you guys ready to grind?
Yes, sir.
Let's get it, bear down.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Bears fans, I can't stress it enough. Continue to stay safe. Once again, my name is Chris Maltby. It's been a pleasure to be your host. Do us a favor, continue to stay safe, and as always, bear down. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.